Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dream Team web series. Today's segment is how to communicate effectively while creating lasting bonds with Lisa Poulson. Lisa, hi. Lisa helps innovators scale by becoming great communicators because great communicators create the change they want to see in the world. So, hi, Lisa. How are you?
Good, good. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being part of this masterclass and serving this community of entrepreneurs who have a desire to be successful. I really appreciate it. So I know that the introduction was really brief. So was wondering if I want the audience to get to know you better, and it would be great if you can go into great detail on how you became a communication coach.
Sure. So I spent the first 25 years of my career in PR. So public relations, if you're really thinking about it broadly, you wind up working with every aspect of how the leaders around you communicate. So I was coaching on internal communications, on keynote speeches, on how to manage meetings well, defining messaging that we would use across everything. And I had a couple of experiences of overseeing massive litigation communications where we would have to make a spreadsheet of all the audiences we needed to talk to, like the regulators and the shareholders and the salespeople and the prospective customers. And so I started to see how there is no barrier between internal and external communication, and that the tactics that you would apply in public relations apply just as much in a one-on-one conversation or a team conversation or your all hands or a meeting with investors. And so when I left public relations, I went to executive coaching school, which was really fascinating because then I'm taking professional development and merging that with everything I know about communications and the way organizations work. And so then I became a communications coach about 5 years ago.
Oh, amazing. I love that. I love your journey, especially because I feel like PR, a lot of it is communicating with one another, but it's just through different avenues, like reaching the customer through either communication or technology. So I think that's really cool. It seems like a natural progression. So communicating is something that we've done, I think, since the moment that we are born. Yet I think we're all unfamiliar on how to effectively communicate with one another.
Right.
Yeah, so I was wondering if how you see that and how you see someone on their journey into learning how to communicate and building that skill set.
Well, it's funny that you say that because when I first got out of executive coaching school, I was like I didn't know what to do because it's such a huge lift. You have to create your products, you have to create your approach, you have to do everything because coaching is so generic, it could mean anything.
Yeah.
So I'm on 101 driving north back up to San Francisco, and I remembered, Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he says communication is the most important skill in life. I'm like, well, if it's the most important skill in life, it's got to be the most important skill in business. And so then I started to look at, well, what is it that I know that goes across every different type of communication? And I came up with 6 things that I think apply just as much in a one-on-one conversation as in a massive press conference or a keynote. And the first one is you really have to know what your message is. So you have to define a provocative and useful message. And this matters just as much if you're having a conversation about why you're giving someone a raise or firing them, as it does if you are going on CNBC. So knowing what you're going to say before you sit down to talk to someone is really important. The second thing is about telling stories. There's tons of amazing research about how stories, when we hear stories, hormones are secreted in our brains. So you get a dopamine hit near the beginning of a story, then a cortisol when you get to that cliffhanger, like, oh no, what's going to happen? And then oxytocin when you hear the end of the story. So people pay attention when they hear stories, and they get invested, and then they bond with the message that they're hearing. And so my theory is have a message that talks to their heads and then like a story that talks to their hearts. And one of the things Daniel Pink talks about in his book Drive is that your employees want, or anybody, your team, whether they're full-time employees or not, they want a sense of autonomy, They want to feel a sense of mastery, and they want to feel a sense of purpose. And so when you communicate with stories, you really help them buy into that sense of purpose.
Does that necessarily need to be a story that you've experienced, or it could be something that you've seen someone else experience?
Yeah. It can be a story that a customer has experienced. It can be a story that someone else told you. It can be a story about a great leader that you've observed, but anything that is relevant to what's going on in your company. And then after you're clear on your message, you have a great message and you have a story to tell, then the next two things are about your audience. So I'm all about, it's not about you, it's about them. What does your audience care about? What do they need? What are their hopes and aspirations and fears? And then, equally importantly, what's the context? What do they understand? Do you and the person you're talking to speak the same language or not? If you're talking to your mom about your business, you use different language than if you're talking to your business partner who you work with every day.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking to a potential investor versus a potential customer, you use different language because they have different needs and different vocabulary. And one of the things, Chris Anderson, who's the TED curator, he has this amazing book about how to give a great TED Talk, which anyone who needs to speak publicly needs to read that book. But he says, use your audience's language. So their language already exists in their head. So you're going in there and basically creating a new apartment building out of the Legos that are in their head. You can't communicate to people in language they don't understand. It won't get in their head. And then finally, the last two things are about preparation and practice and remembering to take care of your body. So if you were going to be, and I used to work when I was in PR, we would take a spokesperson out and we would have him or her do 18 interviews in a day. So if you're the spokesperson, you've got to say, I need to have a coffee break. I need to be able to go to the bathroom. I want this kind of food for lunch. I want to get up and stretch my legs for 20 minutes. Because how you feel massively impacts how well you communicate.
And how do you feel? So I get that. Like, I think how what your energy is what you project kind of thing. So like, yes, you have to be well rested, energized, kind of in a good space in order for you to like portray that as you're communicating with someone else. And so I love the fact that I want to go back to your first step, which was really honing in on what your message is.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because it's like creating confidence, and which goes back all the way to the last two steps. If you don't know what your message is and you're not prepared and you're scared, then no one's going to really listen because you're not really confident.
Right. Exactly. And the last thing that you want to do, let's take a keynote for it. No. Let's do a media interview. You're going to go on TV and not know what you want to say and not be prepared, not know what the questions might be in advance and not have practiced. Anything could happen on live TV. Like, that's the last thing you want. But even in a conversation with your team, if you're going in, we've got this huge project coming up, we need to be ready for it. You need to know what those messages are. And, one of my clients would say that his staff meetings were really disorganized. And I said, well, do you create an agenda? He's like, no. Dude.
Just like numero uno, you do that first.
Yeah. And literally he would just take like 5 minutes and write down, here's what I think we want to cover. And it changed the meetings completely. It doesn't have to be an arduous process. It's just being a little bit deliberate.
Yes. No. And I think too, if once you know that, then it's just clear. It doesn't seem mumbo jumbo, especially if you want someone to feel confident in what you're saying, but then you're not even clear, how do you expect them to understand what you're trying to say?
Exactly.
So when it comes to business relationships, as we forge business relationships, the goal is to cultivate a business relationship with longevity, right? You want it to be a long-term thing. So how does honing one's communication skills provide that?
Well, I think so. Inside your company and outside your company, those used to be completely different, and now they're less different. But let's talk about inside and then kind of go along the path. My theory is to be as transparent as possible. So without scaring people or conveying information that would be illegal to share, I think you should tell your team your mission and values, the umbrella, what's the company's strategy? Why are we going into this space? What is it that we're trying to do? The way that people can function autonomously is if they have enough information to make their own decisions. They don't have enough information to make their own decisions if you're not communicating with them. And so I'm a big fan of openness and sharing as much as you possibly can. I have 2 part-time employees. I have a tiny little company, but I have an operations manual, and we have operating principles and mission and vision document. I have a culture document that explains how I want the tone for how we will treat clients and how we're going to work, like the amount of time that emails need to be responded in, all of that stuff. And all of that is laid out. And also, with every quarter, here are the objectives for the quarter, here's what we're going to do, here's why we're doing it. And then when it comes to partners, so going outside the company, I've become really open with partners as well and saying, I would love to work with you because X, here's what I hope to get out of it, what do you need to get out of it? Instead of kind of walking up to someone and pretending that you have no agenda and pretending that they have no agenda when obviously everybody does. Mm-hmm. So, and being respectful and listening to what your partners have to say. Then with customers, a whole different category. Mm-hmm. Listening. And one of the things that I love that Seth Godin has said over and over again is that you are always communicating your brand. Everything about the way that you function communicates your brand. Mm-hmm. So if you send a customer an email at 11 o'clock at night with typos in it, you're saying more about your brand than you are about the content of the email.
Of course. I think as an entrepreneur, everything from the beginning is straight up your brand, because there's no real marketing. There's nothing that's already there for them to kind of like assume like they already have this thing in their head what your brand is. You are basically the rep for your brand. You are the walking billboard of your brand. You're representing that. So I think it is really like to be open, even with partners, because they don't know what it is that you're even trying to do because you're not established yet. So it's kind of really great to have like that all laid out. I just think it sounds like, even when you were talking about like making sure you have like your strategy in place and outlines, and it's just, I know what it takes to do that. But I think someone starting out, it could feel overwhelming having like protocols set in place, like just, a structure basically, and like how long of an investment that would be for them. So do you think that that's something that should be a barrier, or is there something that's like more step by step that they could do so it doesn't seem like an overwhelming process?
It's definitely a step by step. So the first thing that I did, which only took me like an hour, was, why do I have this business at all? What is my purpose? Why do I want to be in this business? What am I trying to achieve? And so I put that down. That's like a paragraph. That took me, like an hour to think about it and write it. And then I like sat on it for a day or two. Creating the culture, I just scribbled out on a piece of paper. Like I just wrote like a list, like, okay, I want, I've been in business for a long time. So I could say, okay, I want people to treat clients like this. I want us to treat each other like this. I had some notion of what a good culture is and what a good culture isn't. And so I just scribbled that down. And one of the things that's important to me in my culture is responsiveness. So we answer client emails within 24 hours, no matter what. And if we can't, we say so.
Yes.
So that part was simple. Honestly, everything else in my operations manual, my assistants are writing. I'm not doing it. So I did kind of the DNA of it, the little nut of the purpose and the culture of the company. And then they're doing all of the details about like exactly how everything works. And it grows as we grow new projects. So every time we do something new or different, we add. to the operations manual. So it's an ongoing process and a living document. But that initial part of why am I in this business at all? What am I trying to achieve and contribute to the world? And what's the culture that I want to create as I do it? That part I think someone can do on their own in a day.
Oh, of course. I just think sometimes, and I know I can be like this too, where I just like want things to be perfect. And so I think things need to be done a certain way. Like, oh no, it needs to be typed and it has to have like an appropriate letterhead and the logo on top. So then if anyone walks across it, it needs to just be already done. I don't want to just have to write something down. And I think those end up becoming like excuses as to why you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Well, okay, so I was just on a flight back from New York that was delayed for several hours on Saturday, and so I'm sitting there, and I decided to pull out Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, which is one of my favorite books, just because it's delightfully entertaining to read. There's a whole chapter called "Done is Better Than Good," which is just the enemy of perfectionism, because you've got to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? You can put it up on your Google Doc, and you can change it later.
Yes.
And you can decide how public it is.
Exactly. And that's what's good about being an entrepreneur. You're starting. Yeah. It's not set in stone. And I think people see it as set in stone because they don't think they can evolve or change.
I tweak my website every month.
I love it.
I'm like, we'll have a new idea. Like, oh, let's do that. Oh, let's do that. Oh, let's do that. So it's like it's like gardening. It's an ongoing process.
So I want to go back to how we go ahead and when we're forging these relationships, how I find this sometimes to be a struggle, maintaining those relationships, even from a distance.
Yeah.
And how you continue to nurture it and grow instead of allowing it to fizzle out.
Well, one of the things that's really, and this is funny because this comes from being in PR, you had to really cultivate relationships with reporters. And if you didn't reach out to them at times when you didn't want something, you never really built a relationship. So if the only time you ever called the reporter was when you wanted something from them, pretty soon they're like, they just didn't want anything to do with you. So you learn to just stay in touch, write a little note that says, that was a great story you wrote on some other company that has nothing to do with me, or did you see this piece of gossip? And just continuing, it's things that are positive and helpful, and noticing what that other person is doing. So if you're a partnership with someone who is, let's say, a prolific writer on LinkedIn, I really loved your post. I sent it to my team. Just so it's kind of like, I see you, in a good way. And I actually use a program called Contactually, which is a little bit expensive, which is its one flaw, but it merges with my email. And every contact of mine that I suck down from LinkedIn and Outlook and everything else is in there. And then I can put them all in different buckets and say, I want to be in touch with these people in this bucket once a month, and these people in this bucket every 3 months or every 6 months. And then it reminds me and shows me when it's been too long since I've been in touch with someone. So that just helps keep.
That's so neat. I love that.
It's good. So, if it's like, if you've got like 500 people, and you want to, and you don't want to treat them all the same way, that helps. And so you log on, and it gives you this great dashboard where you can see, okay, I haven't been in touch with this person in this long. And one of the things I did, because I felt guilty, I had like 700 people in it, and it was too many, and I really wasn't. A lot of them I barely had anything to say to, so I trimmed it down. Oh. And then I just go on and I'll just send someone a hello. Hey, I'm thinking of you, and I just read this great book. I think you might like it. I really dug this thing about it.
No, I think that's great, because it goes back to the golden rule, right? You treat people how you want to be treated. And if you're always only contacting people when you need something, it's going to come back to you in reverse. And not only that, people want to know that you care about them on a human level, not just because you need something and you're a taker. And so I'm a firm believer, if you give, you receive just as much. Absolutely. And sometimes 1,000 times more. So Absolutely. It's always good to just come from a really caring place, and I just think in business, and when you're dealing with another human being, you want to treat them like you would want to be treated, not as something that you're just trying to get something out of.
And why not throw all that good karma out there in the universe?
Exactly. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt anyone.
And I make an effort to do favors for people and, you know, share resources with people. I have tons and tons of free content on my website that I share with people. So I would much rather, and I love being able to give people referrals. You know, so many entrepreneurs. So it's like, I'm delighted to make introductions to people because I feel like I'm giving them something really valuable, and I love to do that. So that helps build those relationships too.
No, I 100% agree. Which is like how this is why we created this platform, so we can help and give, and with nothing, not expecting anything in return. So thank you. That was well said. I love that. So what would be your number one advice to every entrepreneur building a business to execute their vision?
Well, you know what? I'm going to get down to, and this is coming from my background, what is it that you have to offer? Why do people need it? And why is it different?
Uh-huh.
And, you know, that's basically the same thing. You could use those exact same criteria if you're trying to get a reporter from the New York Times to pay attention to you. Mm-hmm. You know, what is it? Why is it different? Why is it better? Why is it interesting? And so the way that I think about it is, if there's this big mass of thinking or action over here, what are you doing that's like this? What are you doing that's just leaping off in a slightly different direction? What are you doing that's unusual, or thinking about something in a different way that's better, that's different, a new point of view? And that could be anything from, you know, radically disrupting hotels, Airbnb. But honestly, this is going to sound silly, but one of my favorite new products is a shower cap made of microfiber that you can put in the washing machine that I saw on Facebook that's really cute. It has this cute fabric. So, you know, you can disrupt shower caps. You can disrupt the entire hotel industry. There are all kinds of things that you can do that are different. So I think being really, really, really clear about what is the overall market doing, why and how am I different, and why that matters to people and why it will help people. One of the best books I've ever read on messaging, and I wish I'd found it, well, he wrote it this year, so I couldn't have found it earlier. This guy named Donald Miller, and the book is called Building a Story Brand. And he just talks about how, he uses the hero's journey, like that famous Joseph Campbell book about, and how this same story pattern has existed for 10,000 years, and there's a hero, and they want something, and they go on a quest, and they have a crisis, and they need a guide, or they find something magical, and then they learn something and come out in a new place. Mm-hmm. And he says, use that story, but your company and your service isn't the hero, it's the guide. Your customer is the hero. And so going through that process also really helps you refine. So if you've got an amazing, wonderful idea that no one else has, that's step one. The next step is who needs it, who wants it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so part of this is business. Part of this is product and market fit, mm-hmm. which is, do you have a product people want to buy? And part of it is, how do you talk about it to reach the people because you understand what their problems are. Great.
And that all ties into knowing what your message is, yeah. and knowing your product. Like, that's what it is. You have to know what it is that you want to do. And I love the fact that you're like, just be the disruptor. Just yeah. whatever you do, be a disruptor, and just be that one thing that sticks out and challenges the industry.
Yeah.
That's really a powerful message right there. So I just wanted to let the audience know that I know that you spoke about the 6 things basically every great communicator does. And I think that's what you broke down, right? In the 6 steps?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I know that you're offering that, and I'm going to definitely have that on the link of the page, but I wanted you to kind of like just go back into explaining what it is that you're offering.
Yeah. Well, so I have on my website, there's a section called Tools for You, and that has a PDF of these 6 things, and there's a 20-minute audio of me explaining them, and you can download those and listen to it in the car. And just get some advice about how to actually build great messages and how to analyze your audience and how to prepare, and things about dealing with stage fright. And I've got this great methodology for a who, what table, which is who is your audience, what do they care about now, what do they know now, what do they want, and what do you want them to think. So that all that content it's the basis of my methodology, and it just really helps people get started. So I think it's posycorp.com, and then on the top it's tools for you, and they can just go there and sign up and get all of that content for free. And then of course there's the blog and the newsletter, which has a lot. My theory is I'm going to put out 98% of what's in my head for free.
Yes.
So the newsletter and the blog, like I spend a lot of energy putting as much in, I make them as content rich as I can.
No, and it's amazing. And so I'm going to let everyone know that if you want to learn more about this, to go to posycorp.com, and that's going to be in the link in the video and also on the page, along with all the information about Lisa, because to be honest, I really think your website is so resourceful. And I also want to link it back to when we actually develop our tools and resources page, because I think what you do and how you do it is so well done. So we'll be in touch about that after the call. But I just want everyone to take advantage of the 6 things every great communicator does, because I just think it's going to be essential for you. And even when you're going through your pitches, how much more confident you're going to be just going through that process.
Right.
So just take advantage of the offering, because we should be and are committed to ourselves, to becoming the best versions of ourselves every day. So you are the only one who can create your vision to be successful. So why don't you start and do that today? So thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you for joining us in this masterclass, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.